Hello, family. God bless everyone. I pray everyone is doing well. The last video we finished off stopped at chapter 48 in the book of Jasher, and we will pick up in the book of Jasher, chapter 48, verse 1. In those days, after the death of Isaac, the Lord commanded and caused a famine on the whole earth. 2. At that time, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, was sitting on his throne in the land of Egypt. He lay in his bed and dreamed dreams. And Pharaoh saw in his dream that he was standing by the side of the river of Egypt. 3. While he was standing, he saw 7 fat-fleshed and well-favored cattle come up out of the river. 4. And 7 other cattle, lean, fleshed, and ill-favored, came up after them. And the 7 ill-favored ones swallowed up the well-favored ones. Excuse me. And still their appearance was ill as at first. 5. And he awoke. He slept again, and he dreamed a second time. And he saw 7 ears of corn come up on one stalk, full and good. And 7 thin ears, blasted with the east wind, sprang up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the full ones. Then Pharaoh awoke out of his dream. 6. In the morning, the king remembered his dreams, and his spirit was sadly troubled on account of his dreams. And the king hurried, sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and the wise men, and they came and stood before Pharaoh. 7. And the king said to them, I have dreamed dreams, and there is no one to interpret them. They said to the king, relate your dreams to your servants and let us hear them. 8. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered and said with one voice to the king, may the king live forever. This is the interpretation of your dreams. 9. The 7 good cattle which you saw denotes 7 daughters that will be born to you in the latter days. And the 7 cattle which you saw come up after them and swallowed them up are for a sign that the daughters which will be born to you will all die in the lifetime of the king. 10. And that which you saw in the second dream of 7 full good ears of corn coming up on one stalk, this is their interpretation, that you will build to yourself in the latter days 7 cities throughout the land of Egypt. That which you saw of the 7 poor ears of corn springing up after them and swallowing them up while you saw them with your eyes is for a sign that the cities which you will build will all be destroyed in the latter days, in the lifetime of the king. 11. And when they spoke these words, the king did not incline his ear to their words, neither did he fix his heart on them. For the king knew in his wisdom that they did not give a proper interpretation of the dreams. When they had finished speaking before the king, he answered them, saying, what is this thing that you have spoken to me? Certainly you have uttered falsely and spoken lies. Therefore now give the proper interpretation of my dreams, that you may not die. 12. The king commanded after this, and he sent and called again for other wise men. And they came and stood before the king. The king related his dreams to them, and they all answered him according to the first interpretation. The king's anger was set ablaze, and he was very upset. And the king said to them, "Certainly you speak lies and utter falsehood in what you have said." 13. The king commanded that a proclamation should be issued throughout the land of Egypt, saying, "It is determined by the king and his great men that any wise man who knows and understands the interpretations of dreams and will not come this day before the king shall die." 14. The man that will declare to the king the proper interpretation of his dreams, there shall be given to him all that he will require from the king. And all the wise men of the land of Egypt came before the king, together with all the magicians and sorcerers that were in Egypt and in Goshen, in Ramesses, in Tachpanches, in Zor, and in all the places on the borders of Egypt. They all stood before the king. 15. And all the nobles and the princes and the attendants belonging to the king came together from all the cities of Egypt, and they all sat before the king. And the king related his dreams before the wise men and the princes. All that sat before the king were astonished at the vision. 16. And all the wise men who were before the king were greatly divided in their interpretation of his dream. Some of them interpreted them to the king, saying, "The 7 good cattle are 7 kings, who from the king's lineage will be raised over Egypt." 17. And the 7 bad cattle are 7 princes, who will stand up against them in the latter days and destroy them. The 7 ears of corn are the 7 great princes belonging to Egypt, who will fall in the hands of the 7 less powerful princes of their enemies in the wars of our Lord the King. 18. And some of them interpreted to the king in this manner, saying, "The 7 good cattle that are strong cities of Egypt, and the 7 bad cattle are the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, who will come against the 7 cities of Egypt in the latter days and destroy them." 19. And that which you saw in the second dream of 7 good and bad ears of corn is a sign that the government of Egypt will again return to your descendants as at before. 20. And in this reign, the people of the cities of Egypt will turn against the 7 cities of Canaan, who are stronger than they are, and will destroy them. And the government of Egypt will return to your descendants. 21. Some of them said to the king, "This is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good cattle are 7 queens, whom you will take for wives in the latter days. And the 7 bad cattle denote that those women will all die in the lifetime of the king. And the 7 good and bad ears of corn, which you did see in the second dream, are 14 children. And it will be in the latter days that they will stand up and fight among themselves. and 7 of them will strike the 7 that are more powerful. That was 22 in there. And 23, some of them said these words to the king. The 7 good cattle denote that 7 children will be born to you, and they will kill 7 of your children's children in the latter days. And the 7 good ears of corn, which you saw in the second dream, are those princes against whom 7 other less powerful princes will fight and destroy them in the latter days, and avenge your children's cause, and the government will again return to your offspring. 24. The king heard all the words of the wise men of Egypt, and their interpretation of his dreams, and none of them pleased the king. 25. And the king knew in his wisdom that they did not altogether speak correctly in all these words, for this was from the Lord to frustrate the words of the wise men of Egypt, in order that Joseph might go forth from the house of confinement, and in order that he should become great in Egypt. The king saw that none among all the wise men and magicians of Egypt spoke correctly to him. This is 26. And the king's wrath was set ablaze, and his anger burned within him. 27. And the king commanded that all the wise men and magicians should go out from before him. And they all went out from before the king with shame and disgrace. 28. Then the king commanded that a proclamation be sent throughout Egypt to kill all the magicians that were in Egypt, and not one of them should be allowed to live. 29. And the captain of the guards belonging to the king rose up, and each man drew his sword. They began to strike the magicians of Egypt and the wise men. 30. After this, Murad, chief butler to the king, came and bowed down before the king and sat before him. The butler said to the king, "May the king live forever, and his government be honored in the land." That was 31. 32. You were angry with your servant in those days. Now 2 years passed, and did place me in the ward. And I was for some time in the ward, I and the chief of the bakers. 33. And there was with us a Hebrew. And that's who we are, family. We are the Hebrews of the Bible. So there was a Hebrew servant belonging to the captain of the guard. His name was Joseph, for his master had been angry with him and placed him in the house of confinement, and he attended us there. 34. Sometime after, when we were in the ward, we dreamed dreams in one night. I and the chief of the bakers, we dreamed, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. 35. And we came in the morning and told them to that servant, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream, he correctly interpreted. 36. And it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so was the event. There fell not to the ground any of his words. 37. Now therefore, my Lord and King, do not kill the people of Egypt for nothing. Consider that the slave is still confined in the house by the captain of the guard, his master, in the house of confinement. 38. If it pleases the king, let him send for him, that he may come before you, and he will make known to you the correct interpretation of the dream which you did dream. 39. The king heard the words of the chief butler, And the king ordered that the wise men of Egypt should be slain. 40. And the king ordered his servants to bring Joseph before him. And the king said to them, "Go to him, and do not terrify him, that he be confused and will not know to speak properly." 41. The servants of the king went to Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. The king's servants shaved him, and he changed his prison garment and came before the king. 42. The king was sitting on his royal throne in a princely dress, surrounded with a golden ephod, and the fine gold which was on it sparkled, and the gem, and the ruby, and the emerald, together with all the precious stones that were on the king's head, dazzled the eye, and Joseph wondered greatly at the king. 43. And the throne on which the king sat was covered with gold and silver and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. 44. It was their custom throughout the land of Egypt that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince or one that was respected in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as the 31st step. And the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. 45. If he was one of the common people, he ascended to the 3rd step. And the king would descend to the 4th and speak to him, as their custom was. Also, any man who understood to speak in all the 70 languages, he ascended the 70 steps and went up and spoke till he reached the king. 46. And any man who could not complete the 70, he ascended as many steps as the language which he knew to speak in. 47. It was customary in those days in Egypt that no one should reign over them, but one who understood to speak in the 70 languages. 48. When Joseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground before the king, and he ascended to the 3rd step, and the king sat on the 4th step and spoke with Joseph. 49. The king said to Joseph, "I dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter to interpret it properly. And I commanded that all the magicians of Egypt and the wise men thereof should come before me. I related my dreams to them, and no one has properly interpreted them to me." 50. After this, I heard about you, that you are a wise man, and can correctly interpret every dream that you hear. 51. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "Let Pharaoh relate his dreams that he dreamed. Certainly the interpretations belong to the Most High." And Pharaoh related his dreams to Joseph, the dream of the cattle and the dream of the ears of corn. And the king ceased speaking. 52. Joseph was clothed with the spirit of Elohim before the king, and he knew all the things that would befall the king from that day forward. He knew the proper interpretation of the king's dream, and he spoke before the king. 53. Joseph found favor in the sight of the king, and the king listened carefully and with his heart, and he heard all the words of Joseph. And Joseph said to the king, Do not imagine that they are two dreams, for it is only one dream. For that which the Most High has chosen to do throughout the land, he has shown to the king in his dream. And this is the proper interpretation of your dream. 54. The 7 good cattle and ears of corn are 7 years. And the 7 bad cattle and ears of corn are also 7 years. It is one dream. 55. Know this, the 7 years that are coming, there will be a great plenty throughout the land. And after that, the 7 years of famine will follow them. A very severe famine. All the plenty will be forgotten from the land, and the famine will consume the inhabitants of the land. 56. The king dreamed one dream, and the dream was therefore repeated to Pharaoh, because the thing is established by the Most High, and Elohim will shortly bring it to pass. 57. Now therefore I will give you counsel and deliver your soul and the souls of the inhabitants of the land from the evil of the famine, that you search throughout your kingdom for a man very discreet and wise, who knows all the affairs of government, and appoint him to superintend over the land of Egypt. 58. And let the man whom you place over Egypt appoint officers under him, that they gather in all the food of the good years that are coming, and let them lay up corn and deposit it in your appointed stores. 59. And let them keep that food for the 7 years of famine, that it may be available for you and your people and your whole land, and that you and your land be not cut off by the famine. 60. Let all the inhabitants of the land also be ordered that they gather in, every man the produce of his field, of all sorts of food, during the 7 good years, and that they place it in their stores, that it may be available for them in the days of the famine, and that they may live on it. 61. This is the proper interpretation of your dream, and this is the counsel given to save your soul and the souls of all your subjects. 62. The king answered and said to Joseph, who says and who knows that your words are correct. And he said to the king, this shall be a sign for you respecting all my words, that they are true and that my advice is good for you. 63. Behold, your wife sits this day on the stool of delivery, and she will bear you a son, and you will rejoice with him. When your child shall have gone forth from his mother's womb, your firstborn son that has been born 2 years ago shall die, and you will be comforted in the child that will be born to you this day. 64. Joseph finished speaking these words to the king, and he bowed down to the king, and he went out. And when Joseph had gone out from the king's presence, those signs which Joseph had spoken to the king came to pass on that day. 65. The queen gave birth to a son on that day, and the king heard the glad tidings about his son, and he rejoiced. And when the reporter had gone forth from the king's presence, the king's servants found the firstborn son of the king fallen dead on the ground. 66. There was a great lamentation and noise in the king's house, and the king heard it and said, What is the noise of the lamentation that I have heard in the house? They told the king that his firstborn son had died. Then the king knew that all Joseph's words that he had spoken were correct. The king was consoled for his son by the child that was born to him on that day, as Joseph had said. Thank you for listening, family.